40 Acres and Maybe a Mule, Chapter 17. True to his promise, Gideon gave gold coins to all his workers, to the Bibs, and to his family. The hired workers were astonished. "Lordy," a woman said, "ain't enough our boss man give us food and a house to sleep in, now he giving out gold." With a swagger, Gideon answered, "You be getting more pay at cotton settlement time. Be this your early pay." Pascal smiled. He loved his brother's generosity. Gideon had offered jobs to many freed slaves on the road, and because of their work, the family farm was beautiful. Pascal suspected that it made his brother feel like a big man to be generous. "Your land yielded a crop of gold," said Miss Bidman when she received her family's share. "Somebody must have buried it there for safekeeping. But if they ain't returned for it, and since you got title to the land, I reckon it's yours." "Thank you, Gideon. Now maybe your children will never, ever be hungry again." Pascal and Nellie knew where the gold was hidden, in the house. Any time they wanted, they could take out the coins and play with them. Nellie shined fingerprints off her coins. Pascal liked to hear the clink clink of the gold. Now he was a landowner with gold, but he wondered, how much difference did it really make? Since there was no school to attend, Pascal and Nellie picked cotton all day. In the hot August evenings, the whole city family, owners and hired people, sang and grinned cotton, picking out the seeds by hand. Gideon had pounds of cotton, ginned and ready for baling, in their farmhouse, and more cotton opened each day for picking. Mr. Friedman and workers had been digging a well. By the end of August, they reached a muddy dampness that promised good well water. One September evening, the Bib children played hide-and-go-seek under the ghost tree with Pascal and Nellie. A stumbling Pascal kept looking over his shoulder, watching the road. He couldn't find Gladness and Gideon anywhere. All day they had been whispering together, and then they had disappeared. "Oh," Nellie called, "it be mystery of the world time. Hurry, hurry." Judith and Matthew ran over to her, glancing at the road one more time. Pascal limped towards them. "When the stars come out," said Nellie, "you gotta raise your hand so the world goes on." "And if you don't?" Judith asked, dancing from foot to foot. Nellie shook her head solemnly. "It wouldn't be too terrible to tell," she said. "Luckily for us, so far, somewhere, somehow, a child raises hands to the sky in mystery of the world time." "Oh," said Matthew, "you think children make the world go round? Would Papa approve? This ain't about the evil one, is it?" He backed into a row of cotton. "Course not. You can say anything you want, but you say it in your heart." Matthew smiled. "I'll say, praise the Lord." "Me too," said Judith, as a lavender blanket spread over the sky. They all raised their arms. With relief, Pascal pointed. "Here comes Gideon and Gladness at last." Nellie said, "I think I know what they'll say." "Really?" asked Judith as they ran towards Gladness. "Wait and see," sang Nellie, skipping on barefoot toes. Gideon whistled for everyone to gather around. "Bad news first," he told everyone. "In town, they callin' a big meeting Friday night to tell about Sherman lands. Don't know what it'll say, but there be a new Circular 15 for September." He shook his head, and Mr. Friedman moaned. Gideon pointed to Pascal and the other children. "And good news. School will be open again. Miss Anderson and Miss Harris be using new supplies to teach outdoors, excepting on rainy days. Nobody in town had spunk enough to rent them a place for school. Not even for white people's children." He shook his head. "Folks be running scared." School sounded wonderful to Pascal. Now that things were so uncertain, he needed that school learning more than ever. Then Gideon looked at Gladness and began stuttering. "Since we don't have no colored church nor minister in town, the Friedman Bureau man be our official. He's leaving town tomorrow, but before he does, he be coming to visit." He cleared his throat and gazed at Gladness, who swirled her full skirt. "He be coming to marry me in Gladness." Nellie cheered and ran around then, clapping. Pascal stared at Nellie. How come she knew about it and he didn't? He opened his mouth and couldn't shut it. Wasn't Gideon too young? What will Mama say? On the other hand, since Gladness had joined them, Gideon seemed happier. Maybe Gladness was good for Gideon. Nellie ran to hug Pascal. He tried to smile, but his face felt stiff, as it might break into pieces. Would he lose his brother, his family? He still wasn't sure he liked the idea of Gideon marrying. Emmanuel called, "Celebration time! Jubilee night! Hurry, Judith, Matthew, call your folks. Tell the neighbors, tomorrow night we be celebrating a wedding." The next night there was a timid, thin moon, and it smiled crookedly at them. Neighbors colored in white had come from farms and from town. Fires roared in pits surrounded by stones. Gladness wore her best skirt and a dozen red, yellow, green, and blue ribbons in her hair. Gideon wore a clean shirt and his army boots. By the light of the fires, Gideon promised his vows to Gladness, and Gladness promised her vows to Gideon. A smiling Mr. Friedman rubbed his hands. He held a broom under one arm. After Gideon and Gladness had said their words for the official, they married the way colored people did on the plantations. "Hurry, get the broom," Emmanuel called, but Mr. Friedman had it. Hired workers shouted, "Jump the broom, jump the broom!" They were clapping to encourage the bride and groom. Pascal and Nellie each held an end of the broom. Laughing, Gideon and Gladness held hands and looked at each other. Colored people called, "Jump the broom!" Finally, Gideon and Gladness ran up to the broom and jumped over. That meant that they were ready to start keeping a home together. "That be the broom I made, you know," Nellie whispered to Pascal as she stood it against a rock. He nodded. He had never thought it would be used for his brother's wedding. He stared at the wedding group. The portly Freedman's Bureau man looked nervous, as usual. This time he kept glancing over his shoulder at the road. Pascal could understand his nervousness. With black coats, hanging, fires, shooting, threats. This man had been brave to remain in Riverstock this long. Pascal had seen him shot at once. How often since that day in April had the man suffered threats? After everyone congratulated the newlyweds, Mr. Bibbs stood with a wrapped lard bucket in his arms. "Mr. and Mrs. City," he said, "these are for yours, for your all green Gloryland people to enjoy." Gideon uncovered 2 sturdy green plants about 2 hands high and separated in the bucket. As Gideon held it, Gladness fingered the leaves. "Glory be to heaven, y'all," she said. "Thank you. These here be apple trees." "Apple trees?" With a smile, Gideon glanced around. He seemed to be looking for a place to plant them. "We brought the seedlings all the way from Tennessee," said Miss Bibbs, smiling. "We just planted our trees last week." Next, a hired man from Riverstock gave Gladness a rooster and 3 hens. "You can have eggs all winter and hatch chicks for the springtime," he said. "We got wood for a chicken coop," said Mr. Friedman, rubbing his hands. "Tomorrow I'll get started to build one." Pascal turned to Nellie and Judith. "Do y'all know why chickens sleep on 1 egg?" "No, why?" said Nellie. "'Cause if they pulled up that leg, they'd fall." The girls giggled. People congratulated Gladness and Gideon as they stood on the hillside. Neighbors sat on the ground, and Nellie started dancing around the cooking fire. Pascal joined her, skipping and stepping and swaying around and around. He felt better about Gideon being married than he had the day before. Maybe Gladness would help keep Gideon from doing foolish things. Maybe their marriage was all right. "Sing a song about an apple tree. Happy now we all be free. Gonna eat apples often our tree. Sing a song about an apple tree," sang Nellie. Gideon passed with a shovel and bucket. "Can't you wait to plant them tomorrow?" Gladness called. Gideon shook his head. No. He was fairly running. Judith and Matthew followed Pascal, skipping and swaying and dancing around the fires, but they kept glancing at their pa. Naomi sucked her thumb and skipped in place by her mother. Mr. Bibbs said, "Most Baptists don't believe in dancing, but I reckon if King David could dance before the ark, it's all right to dance, so long as it's praising the Lord." Mr. Bibb raised his fiddle and caught the rhythm of the music. Emmanuel served beef boiled with cabbage and turnips and tomatoes. They ate mixed greens, turnip tops, spinach, and lettuce, seasoned with onions and smoked beef. The children drank boiled milk, and the grown-ups drank boiled coffee. Kettles of food and pots of coffee filled the air with good smells mingled with laughter. A smiling Emmanuel told Pascal, "This be the most perfect jubilee I ever did see, the way it should be, colored and white. We're all just neighbors." Pascal added wood, and the yellow fires danced higher as the night grew darker. He visited colored people he had not seen before and asked, "We looking for two brothers sold from Mama. Her name be Jerusalem City, and we from South Carolina." "Sorry," one man said. "Hope you find your brothers," said another. Someone else promised, "I'll pass word for you." Pascal turned away sadly. At least he had Gideon. After he planted his trees, Gideon called for silence. He said, "Mr. Alonzo Deliverance celebrates with us from the heavenly glory land. Him and thousands like him. Lord, remember them and give us your strength." He looked down. Everyone stood silently along the cracking fires and insect calls. Pascal felt a choking sadness. He glanced at a road and stood straight at danger. "Amen," Gideon called, and waved at Mr. Bibb to begin fiddling again. Pascal ran over and whispered in his ear. Suddenly, his fiddle died. With a glance toward the road, Mr. Bibb raised the fiddle again and began the slow Virginia reel. Pascal waved to Judith. Judith beckoned to Matthew, curtsied, and held her skit to the side to dance. Matthew glanced towards the road, then danced. Several other white people took hands to dance, stiffly and stately, bowing, crossing over, promenading. Pascal ran down the hill and pushed his tall brother to sit down. White people danced on the hilltop, putting themselves by the light of the fires, while Pascal waved for colored people to draw back into the shadows. Everyone caught the idea in a short time. "Look," Pascal whispered to Gideon and Nellie and pointed. A carriage rolled slowly down the road, balancing to keep from falling. The man beside the river stood and watched the dance on the hill crest. Mr. Gillem calling a square dance next. When the carriage reached the end of Green Gloryland, the driver turned the carriage around, and the horses quip-clopped slowly by Gideon's farm again. Then they were gone. Judith laughed and ran to Pascal. "We fooled him again," she called. Her breath smelled of turnip greens and onions. The barrel-shaped Freedmen's Bureau man silently handed Gideon and Gladys their wedding papers. Wiping his mouth, he hustled down the hill. As he rode off, he gave a quick wave. Gideon and Gladys stood side by side, watching him leave. When the wedding guests left for home, Gideon stood by the road. Carrying his walking stick, Pascal joined him. After a while, his eyes were closing. "Come on, Gideon," he said. "We gotta sleep. Gladys be waiting for you back at the house." Gideon moaned. "I feel it be only a matter of time." "Time till what?" "Time till I lose my farm. Just a few of us colored that ain't been shot at, or burned out, or scared away. It just be a matter of time." No, Gideon," said Pascal. "Things gonna change soon. Nellie and me be helping you keep the farm safe. Besides, if we lost it, what would we do?" Gideon glared at him and started towards the house. Pascal limped behind him. He thought back from April through May, June, July, August, and now into September. He remembered escaping in the night from their master, the man who shot Mr. Freedman, the woman who said President Lincoln deserved to die for freeing people's property, the night riders saying they shot the uppity colored people and captured the submissive ones, the black codes for vagrancy laws, the work contract they signed, the lynching of Mr. Deliverance, the burning of colored people's fields, the burning of Jubilee Town, the burning of the schoolhouse. What kind of freedom was this? Why couldn't white people just let them live?